Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jordyn Smith, and I am the astrologer behind the YouTube channel and the webpage Nonconformist Conscience. In this video, I am going to go over the new moon happening in Pisces, which is occurring on Monday, February the 20th, 1:06 a.m. That is Central Time. And then I'm going to go over how a few hours after this new moon, Venus will go into the sign of Aries, where she will then be ruled by Mars in the sign of Gemini. For those of you who want a detailed view or snapshot of this week, I will put the link to the written report that I put out on Tuesdays for this week. Each day I go over a planetary conversation transit that's happening, and I focus in on that and break it down for each day. But for this video, I am going to go over this Pisces new moon. I feel like this is a powerful, powerful new moon. So we know that new moons are when the sun and the moon conjunct and assign together. They also symbolize, new emotional dynamics that we are meant to work on for the next 6 months until there's a full moon in the same sign. So it represents a 6-month cycle where it culminates after 6 months. And it's Pisces, so this is a new emotional cycle dealing with culminating dynamics. And the astrology of the days leading up to this new moon and on the day of this new moon can give us a little insight into what we are going to be working on emotionally for the next 6 months. So let's talk about Pisces a little bit. Pisces, like I said, is about culmination. It is a culmination of all of the dynamics of what each zodiac represents archetypically. So we can also look at this sign as, for every time it goes into the sign of Pisces once a year, it can be a culmination of the archetypal nature that we've worked through each one of those signs. And within Pisces, the feeling of standing on a precipice is something that we hear a lot in regard to this sign. And that is because when you're wanting to culminate something on a soul level, it's because there's a soul yearning and feeling of, I'm about to start a brand new cycle. So it's almost paradoxical that this is a new moon in the sign of Pisces. When we look at Pisces, we are looking at a whole set of emotional dynamics, especially pertaining to this new moon cycle, because this new moon is ruled by Neptune, who is in a conjunction, in a new phase conjunction with Venus while this is happening. And so it is a culmination of relational dynamics and emotions coming up. It's about a culmination of how we've been inwardly and outwardly relating. And it is pulling in Virgo, which is very much an archetype of readjustment, realigning. And when we look at this new moon, it pulls in Uranus and Taurus naturally through the symbols within this chart. Uranus being ruled by that Venus and Pisces at the 29-degree mark. Culmination, that's another signature of culmination, yet it's in a new phase. And so something's wanting to culminate so that the new can come in. there's, you know, a semi-sextile between Venus and Saturn while this is going down, and then a sextile between Venus and Pluto while this new moon is going down. This new moon is also trine the south node and sextile Uranus. So we're looking at a readjustment and realignment about returning to where we came from, or to source or spirit through the natural sextile of Taurus and Pisces. This is also returning back to really more grounding and rooting oneself in whom we naturally are. If we're connecting with the spiritual body, with where we came from, we're needing to ground in that as a way to radically alter how we are inwardly relating with ourselves. And through that, with Uranus, we can then project that out and change our vibration. And that will create a series of events that get triggered for some of us to be able to then outwardly relate in a different way. And so this new moon can symbolize a plethora of things relating to these dynamics. And I want to break this down even further for everyone so we can, in my hopes, get a better understanding of just what different types of situations can arise for a new understanding of the emotional body. So with this new moon being ruled by Neptune, who is in the sign of Pisces, who's in a new phase conjunction with Venus, it's very much about dealing with our relational dynamics and wanting to culminate them, as I stated earlier. But there's a need through this sextile from Venus to Pluto in the sign of Capricorn being ruled by Saturn, who is semi-sextile this Venus. There's a need to be, it's cardinal energy. So there's a need to, in order for us to culminate something, we actually have to take a step back and to review. So it's the whole cardinal energy of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And that is through reflection, which is a Capricorn dynamic. And through this reflection, we get to take ownership of our choices, especially in regard to choices that were made out of how we were conditioned instead of whom we naturally are. So there's a really big theme of all of this playing out with this 6-month cycle. So there's a lot of different ways that this can play out for people. This can be reflecting on choices stemming from our conditioning, where we have created idealistic expectations, or the needing to dissolve our idealisms and needing to understand where those stem from our conditioning. So some people can experience disillusionment. Some can experience, victim consciousness. Some people can really experience coming back to whom they are and gaining a natural authority over oneself after they've, been dissolving the conditioning of the prior dynamics and the prior beliefs that have created maybe false judgments or incorrect judgments and incorrect choice making stemming from that conditioned reality that one was living in. I was really wanting to be able to explain this in a relatable way. And so I actually looked up what the definition for ideals are. It's kind of one of those words, I can use it appropriately, I know it, but for me to put it in language, I wanted to be able to pull up the definition. And I feel like this so accurately speaks to some of these dynamics. So if we are needing to dissolve our ideals around relationships of how we're inwardly and outwardly relating, pertaining to this new moon and the emotional dynamics that are coming up, we're needing to then reflect on, through the sextile of Venus with Pluto, so that it can be easily integrated. We're needing to reflect on what ideals are. And so the definition is satisfying one's conception of what is perfect, most suitable. So there's a need at really reflecting on our conditioning around what we feel is perfect or most suitable. And then looking at the truth of that. Is that working for you? Also keeping in mind that perfection is an illusion. And so some people can, through a dissolving process over the next 6 months, experience emotional dynamics that surface or events that get triggered externally so they can get to the bottom of what their ideals are. And that is where one can experience disillusionment, because it's an ideal. It's the illusion of perfection. And it's a beautiful 6-month opportunity to really be able to liberate from these things, to reveal deeper levels of whom we naturally are. So through reflecting about our ideals, there can be situations where what we once felt was meaningful now all of a sudden feels like blah, like this isn't what I thought it was. This isn't really, it leads back to desires, right? I exhausted a desire and now I'm needing to reflect on where I might have been externalizing and giving that desire ultimate meaning. And through that, there's new choices that need to be made. So this is also because Venus is semi-sextile Saturn and Aquarius, which is Pluto's ruler, and it is ruled by Uranus and Taurus. Semi-sextiles can create an underlying friction. Like there's an action that needs to be taken in order to have that promise of the Venus sextile to Pluto come into fruition so that it can be integrated with ease. And so there's a call to act on how to liberate from these dynamics to create new structures, sound foundations that feel that they are in alignment with whom we naturally are. Mercury is still squaring the nodal axis, and the resolution node is the south node in Scorpio. And so for some, this can be also looking at where we're projecting the past circumstances or our trauma. I talked a little bit about this last week, onto the present moment, and we're not seeing the truth or being able to be present because we're, maybe we're having cognitive dissonance. This is what this Mercury in Aquarius square to the south node in Scorpio really indicates to me. And it's about where we are not wanting to see the truth because it would, or it feels like there's an illusion that it would cost us too much. It would cost us too much to look at that, to reflect on that, and then to make a choice to liberate from that. It would cost us too much to believe the truth, to see the truth. And that can be very personal, where you're having to be honest with oneself and get to the bottom of where maybe you were projecting onto someone and it wasn't the truth, and it created trauma. This can also be really needing to liberate from these types of dynamics by getting to the bottom of them. Mercury square the south node, and that's the resolution. There is a need to penetrate and get to the bottom of this. That South Node in Scorpio is ruled by this Pluto that is aspecting that Venus. And so it is necessary to reflect on these as a way to get to the bottom of them. It is necessary to take responsibility for the choices that you've made. And with all of the Pisces energy going on, there is deep, compassionate forgiveness and grace that one can give oneself for understanding I didn't do what was where I was remaining in integrity with myself. I wasn't honoring who I was, and I made a choice out of fear or reaction or projection. And so there's a need to take responsibility for that as a way to gain wisdom, the Capricornian wisdom that comes from the direct experience of reflecting on choices. So I like to tell clients, because there's this Pluto and Cap that's at the 29-degree mark, that's a culmination as well. And we know with Pluto and Capricorn, we're looking at how we've structured ourselves through the conditioning of, where we came into this lifetime, where we were born. It's our ancestral karma, and really looking at why we chose to set up shop and to experience the type of conditioning that we did. But with Pluto in Capricorn and these, Piscean kind of archetypes floating around with this new moon, one can get into self-defeating thoughts, or when one reflects and becomes aware through being objective through the reflection, which is what this chart is also speaking to, with Pluto being ruled by Saturn in Aquarius, Mercury squaring the nodal axis, there can be this sense of, well, I messed up and I've got to start everything all over again. All of my stuff is just null and void now. Or it can be an excruciatingly painful experience of feeling like you're not a good person, like you made these choices and I'm so ashamed and I feel so judgmental of myself and so much guilt because I did that. Here's the thing. When we're reflecting and that happens, that is an illusion that has been conditioned on us, that things aren't null and void when you feel like you come to an awareness. We can gain compassion and grace and forgiveness for ourselves and our prior choices by reframing how we think about that. And oh my gosh, I came into an awareness and I can see my growth because I came into awareness. And that's the thing about evolution, is you don't ever have to be the person that you once were. And there's a beauty in that. There's something very honest and pure and very innocent with understanding that that is evolution, that you can look back and you can be honest and you can not like what you've done or the choices you've made or how you reacted to external events, but you can see the growth and becoming aware and taking ownership and being responsible and almost patting yourself on the back and being like, look how far I've come. I would never make that choice today. And there's a need to dive into these dynamics and where one's experiencing them and where one is feeling guilt or feeling like they can't move forward because they're paralyzed within grief or a victim consciousness. This is also just a beautiful time to be able to not only learn lessons of forgiveness and compassion, but discernment. That's what these, these lessons contain within them, are the lessons of discernment, of understanding that I can be responsible with my choices now. And I can discern and I can make a judgment call after discerning what I need to do, how I want to go about this. You know, Mars in Gemini is ruled by this Mercury that's squaring the nodes. And so it is about choice making and looking at the choices that we've made. And it's also about liberating from those and looking at all of the little areas where we might be resisting and looking up where we felt traumatized and understanding that we called that in on some level. And through this experience, a culmination of how we're inwardly relating with ourselves can happen. And the beautiful thing with this new moon is it is trining the south node. The sun is trining the south node. The sun is in a disseminating trine, meaning that the sun is where we get to be re-energized and revitalized. And so it's like honoring the truth and getting to the bottom of the truth through reflection and through dissolving ideals and allowing that culmination of relational dynamics of how we relate inwardly with ourselves, how we go out and project that into the world as well. That if we are willing and have the courage to make the choice to liberate Mars and Uranus, Saturn, through reflection, Pluto, and Capricorn, we can culminate a whole realm and spectrum of relational dynamics through the disseminating trine, because that information is readily available for us to see the truth. If you ask for the truth to be revealed, it will, but you have to have the courage to be able to look at it for what it is and to reflect on that, and then to make new choices that are in alignment with whom you are. Because as this reflection process happens, the radical alteration of how we inwardly relate can take form, can take shape through implementing new needs and new values that are in alignment with whom we naturally are instead of how we've been conditioned to be. So as things come up emotionally for the next 6 months, this can be a powerfully spiritual time on any level of evolution. If one is willing to reflect and observe and to allow to surrender to the dissolving of the ideals of what we thought something could be, should be, the potential, or how we assumed or bought into the illusion that it would be perfect once we obtained it or got it. And the readjustment happens where we get to realign with where we came from, what is natural about us, instead of carrying all of this conditioned tar. That's what it feels like this tar that's just like weighing you down. It's stinky, it's sticky, you feel like you can't move. And we get to dissolve that away through doing this, through doing that inner work. This is a call to culminate. And culmination, you can't jump forward without, dotting the I's and crossing the T's before. And this is what this new moon in Pisces is really reflecting and symbolizing. There's so many dynamics of culmination and also that whole 2 steps forward, 1 step back. With the sextiles, there is a need to, Mars in Gemini is semi-sextile Uranus, and Mars is ruled by that Mercury that's squaring the south node. It's ruled by that Uranus, and then Uranus is ruled by this 29-degree Venus in Pisces that is conjunct her ruler in a new phase. And so this is symbolizing that in order to culminate, one needs to retreat, reflect, observe, honor the truth, see the truth, experience the truth, not get hung up on illusions of what ifs, shoulda, coulda, wouldas, self-defeatism, victim consciousness, feeling so victimized that it's almost re-traumatizing. Not almost, it is. And through that semi-sextile from Uranus to Mars, there's a need to then act, to make choices as a way to have this counterpoint through the action of a new choice and doing it that you feel is in alignment with whom you naturally are, where it's an experience of where one can learn how to ground oneself and one's naturalness and become self-sufficient. We can then, you know, liberate. Mars is trining Mercury, its ruler, and it's through the counterpoint of action that we get feedback. And that helps us with this Pisces dynamic of needing to readjust as a way to culminate. It's needing to go back and to review as a way to culminate. And it's through, now I understand my choices I made and why. How can I now integrate these new ways of being, radically alter whom I am, align myself with whom I naturally am, and then make new choices? And then through the counterpoint of action from those choices, we get to readjust as necessary. We get to see what is working for us, what is not working for us. Does this feel true for me? You know, Jupiter is ruled by this Mars in Gemini, so it's connecting the energies of, you know, Mercury, whom it's in a sextile with. It is about liberating from old beliefs and creating new identities by shedding the old skins of the past, and how we've overly self-identified with one concept of ourselves that we've been projecting out, while maybe inwardly feeling very different. The realignment and the readjustment occurs when we realign the interior, how we're inwardly relating, with how we're projecting ourselves out in the external. And that ultimately helps us radically alter what we're like, how we're inwardly relating. So there's all types of things that can be coming up for people where, I mean, it can be the more difficult experiences of disillusionment or feeling victimized, or, you know, feeling or buying into the illusion that things are futile with, you know, Venus sextile Capricorn Pluto. But the readjustment that can occur really symbolizes this surrendering process of, I can't control what goes on. All I can do is ground myself in whom I naturally am. And through that, and owning that, and remaining in integrity with the values and the needs and meeting one's own needs, the radical alteration and the culmination of a whole series of dynamics can happen, so that one does feel self-sufficient. One feels like they can have better self-esteem. All of these Taurus, you know, Uranian qualities. It's looking at where we have disassociated from prior experiences and now needing to reconnect with them as a way to jump into the emotional nature of that, as a way to fully heal. There's a great AA quote, if you're someone who's ever been, and it is, I grew up in a family who, like, everyone's in AA, but it's this expression, you've got to feel it to heal it. And this new moon totally speaks to that. If you're wanting to culminate emotional dynamics, then you're going to have to feel it to heal it. And that means that you're going to have to self-reflect. This can be a beautiful time for one to realign with the inner goddess. This can be a time of learning surrender. This can also be a time of learning what is the supreme form of giving is, that Jeffrey Wolfgreen talks about. We've got this new moon in conjunct Ceres in the sign of Libra, ruled by this Pisces Venus that's at an anaretic degree conjunct its ruler. So external events can be triggered as a way to reclaim something that we have forgotten was there. And with Ceres being in Libra, being ruled by this Venus in Pisces, this is about looking at our expectations and our needs and learning how to meet one's own needs by revealing the truth of what our actual needs are, not the projected conditioned needs that one has been taught or society is projecting out that this is what you should give ultimate meaning to. This in conjunct can be experienced also as the readjustment. If an imbalance has been created where someone's abandoning themselves within partnership or relationship, a readjustment can happen as a way for them to finally see the truth. And that readjustment helps in a surrendering process for someone. And this can sound, very doom and gloom, but I feel like this is so beautiful. I feel like Pisces, even though sometimes it's so misunderstood, but it's like these experiences of deep disillusionment that can be so painful have a way of really realigning us, uncovering, having us, forcing us to come out of hiding from whom we are, and reconnecting with that through the external experiences. No matter what, though, this is a time where one can really ground and root back into where one finds their most natural self and find new ways of self-identifying that are in alignment with the truth of whom they are, and creating new beliefs that ultimately help heal them. And with Ceres ruler being Venus, and Uranus and Taurus being ruled by Venus, these external experiences that could be triggered by the in conjunct with this new moon between Ceres and the new moon, it serves the purpose not only to realign and readjust, but to create that radical altering of how one is inwardly relating. So I want to make sure I've hit all the points that I really wanted to make. Pisces can give the lessons that can be tough for some. But what I did want to say is within that realm of the supreme form of giving, that's learning how to listen not only to your inner voice, but how to listen to where someone actually is coming from as well. And sometimes that means appearing not to give. I can give a personal story that I experienced that kind of symbolizes this. And I feel like it was the most beautiful thing that ever happened in my life. But so I have a Libra moon, and I had reached a limitation, and I was in these codependent and enmeshed type of relationships. And I experienced a lot of disillusionment and feeling extremely victimized by life at after everything had culminated over like a 10-year period. I was trucking along for a long time, but I even had cognitive dissonance about some of the things. But through a very Piscean Virgo experience, I learned what a supreme form of giving was, which was I had been sacrificing myself and whom I was as a way to continue relationships that I had given ultimate meaning to or had ideals, and those were my expectations about them. When everything came crumbling down on me, like during my Saturn return, like it happens for a lot of people, I had to reflect and look at my choices that had led to that, the experiences that I had had. And when I got to the threshold of I can't be me around these people, I decided that I was no longer willing to play my role that I had always played, that was expected of me within that system. And when I did that, I had to learn great psychological boundaries with people and remaining grounded in whom I was. And the experience that happened was I learned that if I did not quit playing the role that I had been, playing, that was projected and expected of me, that I was getting in the way of my own evolutionary growth. And I was also getting in the way of those people's evolutionary growth. Because if I continued to play the role, the cycle persisted. And that cycle just created tons of, disillusioning experiences time and time again. And when I reached the threshold of understanding that and not willing to sacrifice whom I was anymore, I, in a true Piscean fashion, had to sacrifice those relationships. And it wasn't because I hated these people. In fact, I very much love them still. But it's because it was the Piscean thing. I wanted for them what I wanted for myself, which was growth and love and compassion and joy and to become healthy and all of these things. And so whenever I made the conscious choice to appear to not give by taking myself out of the equation, I will tell you, I skyrocketed evolutionary wise. And I am not attached to how those people are evolving, because at the very least, I know it plants a seed for the future, maybe not even in this lifetime, but it comes from a loving place without strings attached. And so I bring all of this up because these are things that people can maybe experience, not necessarily on the extreme level that I did. I Libra moon at 29 degrees. It in the 6th house, it takes a extreme to counteract an extreme. Jeffrey Wolf Green talks about it. I just had a conversation with one of my girlfriends about it the other day. So here's the thing, with all of these sextiles and semi-sextiles going down during this new moon and looking at this snapshot of certain dynamics that one can experience in the next 6 months, the key is to listen to the inner voice and to reflect and observe and make correct judgment through discernment. Because with the semi-sextiles, there'll be friction that can help one readjust as necessary. That's not a painful, disillusioning friction. The sextiles symbolize an ease of integration. It's whenever we resist the need to evolve and to look at the truth of what is occurring and only wanting to look at the potential, or not seeing the whole thing because we're projecting something onto it, that these types of events that I'm talking about can be created. But with this new moon, there's an ease of being able to do this so that those things don't have to happen. This speaks to an ease of culminating if one is willing to jump into those depths. That doesn't mean that things can't be painful when you look at them and you reflect on them, but it doesn't mean that it has to be cataclysmic or crisis because you're resisting it. Wolf talks about how we don't evolve through the mind, through the analytics, we evolve through the emotional body. And so there's a call to really utilize the semi-sextiles and the sextiles to make new choices after we've been reflecting and looking at our inner content, our psychological and emotional nature, which is represented by the trine this new moon is having with the South Node, and through Mercury being square to the South Node. And through doing this, it will pull in the North Node. One will become more self-sufficient. One will become more grounded. One will understand whom they naturally are. And evolution doesn't have to be cataclysmic, and one can really feel the beauty of surrendering to understanding that the wave is part of the ocean. And then through that, as new choices arise, one can feel a little scared at first by making new choices with all of this Aquarian energy, because it's a liberation, a process that's wanting to occur through culmination. But what it can do is, with Pluto at an anaretic degree, being ruled by Saturn, both of these planets being in conversation with Venus, it can teach one how to gain natural authority and to emotionally validate and to become secure in oneself through correct choice making as this reflection, observation, and dissolving happens. So it's a very powerful time if you're someone who is feeling very disempowered, feels like they don't know how to meet their own needs, feels like their thinking is getting in the way, or that they're seeing these perpetuations of cycles come up. Through reflection and observation, one can then discern as a way to culminate these relational dynamics. And then one can feel self-secure through the polarity of Pluto. And it's through the taking responsibility of the new choices that are wanting to come and be created. So here's the thing. As this new moon is going down, and we've talked about all of these culminating simultaneously new phases starting, this new moon has Venus and Pisces at the time. Later on in the day, it moves into the sign of Aries, and it will be ruled by Mars in the sign of Gemini. And it shows that in order to culminate, one needs to act on the instinctual nature to make choices. One needs to have the freedom and the independence to be able to go out there. And then through choice making, Mars, Gemini, ruled by Mercury, one can have the counterpoint through action that they get feedback that is necessary so that it can now shape new identities or new ways of thinking, relating, and being in the world that, you know, we didn't feel were possible. It's like there's this momentous period of time where there's wanting a identity to be revealed, and it's through sloughing off the conditioned and then going after what it is that one is wanting to experience, tapping into what do I desire? What are the choices that I'm desiring to have? What does this look like? And then the key with Mars and Gemini is Mars and Gemini can be duplicitous. So there's a need to utilize the sextiles and semi-sextiles and these trines as a way to integrate instead of feeling one way on the inside and then not doing it externally, not being that externally. So there's like this duplicitous nature and teachings revolving around this for some people as they're getting their sea legs during this like culmination cycle. That's a new culminating cycle as it's coming up. So, you know, Mars will still be trying its ruler during this, but through action, through not being reactive, but through responding to a choice, through reflecting about it, one can make a correct judgment, and then that can help alter and liberate the way one has thought or made choices prior. And it's through this experience and this Venus moving into the sign of Aries after this full moon is kind of like the universe saying, okay, there's some counter feedback that needs to be had as a way to make the adjustments necessary, as a way to continue this culmination process. That's a new cycle that we're in. So I just wanted to give everyone these reflections on this. I hope that this is beneficial for some of you guys. I really like to talk about the psychological nature utilizing evolutionary astrology as a way to help people, and by really trying to, for those who are wanting to learn astrology, really breaking down what each one of the transits occurring within a chart are reflecting. And of course, this is my own observation and correlation. This will look different for each person. You can take these core dynamics though, and then pull up this chart and put it in your own natal chart to see where you might be experiencing some of these things. I know personally, I have Venus, Neptune in my 11th house, and I have been having things happen where, and it is, you know, sextile to my own Mercury, but what has been happening is me becoming my own natural authority and liberating through different types of relational dynamics through that being in the 11th house, and for me remaining in my authenticity. This is just a snapshot of what it could look like for any person. I used my chart as a way to express this, but you know, take a look at where this is happening in your chart and see how this could be something that you could utilize as a tool for your own healing process during this next 6-month period, because there are things at the very least for each one of us that are wanting to culminate, and it's to realign and readjust and to come back to home, right? Pisces, it's to come back and ground through this Taurus North node, you know, in a natural sextile to this Piscean energy. It's to come back to this space, to the center within, and to become self-sufficient through radically altering how we relate to ourselves. So I think that this is, no matter what, for any level of evolution, spiritual experiences can happen, and that doesn't mean like the woo-woo. This means like the meat and the potato spiritual experiences, the earthly grounding spiritual experiences of learning how to become self-sufficient, how to become connected with the inner voice, how to rely, to self-rely, how to become your own natural authority, how to decondition from all of the prior, you know, and there are deep lessons in understanding what the truth is and what opinion is with this chart. And so this is a time where one can really want to practice or create a spiritual practice, maybe utilizing astrology, maybe looking at addictions, and then, you know, wanting to, instead of, you know, drinking, or instead of doing this or doing that, put in place something that's more spiritual, that's more in alignment with whom you naturally are, that doesn't create a buffer to rejecting that. So that can be whenever I feel like drinking, I'm going to go outside and I'm going to meditate. I'm going to use that time to meditate, or I'm going to use that time to journal. And so kind of going into your really human, earthly toolbox and utilizing these things as a way to dissolve the old way of being and relating, and just deepening your inner connection with self. This is a momentous time for that. It's a beautiful time for that. It is a beautiful time to have so much healing happen, and for self-recognition. This chart to me symbolizes like the ability to self-recognize and to be in awe and wonder of it, and to want to get to the bottom of why maybe someone lost themselves or didn't recognize who they naturally were, stemming from, conditioning and societal or religious or familial conditioning. So I hope all of you guys have a beautiful new moon in Pisces. Take a nice cleansing bath with some Epsom salts, with this Aquarius Pisces stuff going down, as a way to just set an intention for what you want to understand, or to set the intention to surrender to what wants to be revealed to oneself. Just the intention of it, because this moon is mutable, will help start getting that flowing. And this new moon is a beautiful moon for those types of intentions, to become self-aware, to become more spiritual, to become more honest, to understand more timeless, universal, and natural principles about oneself. And through the liberation of the old, one can implement those within, thus becoming more self-secure, more self-sufficient, self-reliant, self-responsible. That is the prayer of this new moon. So I will talk more next week about Venus through the sign of Aries. And as she is aspecting different things and conversating with different planets, luminaries, I'll be here to talk about it the whole way. And I will see you all next week.